This family adopted a baby, and here's how they found her special talent. 8,000 miles away from them in China, a baby was found in a shoebox outside of a train station. The baby was then transported to an orphanage. When the walkers saw pictures of the baby, they instantly fell in love and flew to China to adopt her. When they got home with their new baby, the little girl was amazed by their grandfather clock. Every time it struck the hour, the little girl would sing with the clock. And her parents were shocked because every time her pitch was perfect. That's when her parents realized she was naturally gifted. And as she grew up, they took her to music classes. She was even asked to sing the national anthem at a Houston Astros baseball game. A Grammy-nominated producer heard her singing and offered her a recording contract. She agreed and had her debut album, called Simple Gifts, recorded in Asheville. This man got locked in a grocery store. Kevin Blackwood got locked in an Aldi's grocery store after it closed.
So I had to call 911 because the alarm is activated and I can't get out.
But it wasn't his fault, because the cashier closed the store 15 minutes early and didn't check to see if there's anyone else still in the store.
I just got locked in at Aldi and they don't close till like 9 o'clock.
It was probably one of the best places to be locked in because there's a ton of food.
I don't have to worry about starving to death because there's plenty of food.
But eventually the cops arrived and they unlocked the doors. Here's how they caught Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was an American serial killer. He used his ability to talk in a polite manner to pass off as a quiet guy. Although the police had witnesses saying they seen a man with his characteristics in the same places where a woman had gone missing, they didn't find a killer. But then a sketch of Ted Bundy was released, and after this, the police received tons of calls saying they identified the killer. And finally, in 1975, the police arrested Ted for a traffic violation. He raised the police's suspicion when he wanted to leave, but they stopped him, and when they checked his car, they found questionable objects like crowbars, ski masks with holes for the eyes, handcuffs, and a lot more. He was then arrested a year later for an attempted kidnapping and sentenced to 15 years in prison. And months later, he was charged with the murder of Karen Campbell. In prison, he wasn't tied up, so he jumped out of the window of a library and escaped. He was captured a week later, but within months, he escaped again. He committed more murders both times he escaped, including a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. In 1979, he went on trial for the murders he committed at a sorority house. He was convicted and sentenced to death in the electric chair. After a bunch of appeals, he was electrocuted in 1989 and pronounced dead. But before his execution, he confessed to a bunch of murders, and it's believed that he may have committed over 50. 3 rejected Shark Tank pitches that made millions. First off, we have the Ring doorbell. So if you don't know what it is, it's a doorbell that has a camera on it, and whenever it detects motion or someone rings the doorbell, it sends a notification to your phone, where you can then go onto the app and see them or even talk to them. When Jamie Siminoff appeared on the show, the company was worth $7 million. Now the company doesn't just make doorbells, but they also make home security systems and a bunch more. Amazon gave them $1 billion to have their items on their website. The Books is an online flower delivery service. In 2014, they left Shark Tank without an investor. But 3 years later, one of the sharks needed flowers for his wedding and ended up using the service. After that, he ended up investing in them. And in 2017, they sold $1 million of flowers in just one day. Finally, the bed jet is placed under your covers and allows you to change the temperature, rather than changing it for your whole house, which costs more money. But since he had no sales, all the sharks were out. When he released it to the market, he sold $3 million worth in his first month. 3 animals that you'll be glad are extinct. First off, we have the Gigantopithecus blackie, which is the largest ape that ever lived. It was almost 10 foot tall and weighed over 1,100 pounds. It also walked on its fists. But surprisingly, it didn't eat meat, but would still protect itself from its predators, which included tigers, leopards, and bears. The Beelzebuffoampinga was a large frog that was 40 centimeters tall and weighed almost 10 pounds. Instead of eating flies and small bugs, it would lie hidden until lizards or young dinosaurs approached, then it would snap them up with their enormous jaws. And lastly, we have the Brontosaurus burmisteri, which was the largest carnivorous bird ever at 10 feet tall, also weighing around 1,000 pounds with massive claws. It was also as quick as a cheetah, and its kick was hard enough to shatter a bone. The strangest last meal requests on death row. Ricky Ray Rector killed a man in a restaurant then ran away. 3 days later, he agreed to turn himself in, but then he shot the police officer in the back. His last meal included steak, fried chicken, cherry Kool-Aid, and a slice of pie. But he didn't even touch the pie. And when they asked him why, he said he was saving it for later. Peter J. Miniel robbed and murdered a 20-year-old by stabbing him 39 times. For his meal, he requested 20 beef tacos, 20 beef enchiladas, 2 double cheeseburgers, a pizza with jalapenos, fried chicken, spaghetti with salt, half a chocolate cake, half a vanilla cake, cookies and cream ice cream, caramel fudge ice cream, a small fruit cake, 2 Coca-Colas, 2 Pepsis, 2 root beers, and 2 orange juices. Finally, we have Velma Barfield, who killed a total of 6 people. And all she wanted for her last meal was a bag of cheesy doodles and a can of Coke. These inspectors found 110 violations at a restaurant called China Buffet. When the interviewers got there, they found steak lying on the ground, and the sink where they cleaned dishes looked like this. Just a few things that the inspectors found were 6 live roaches near a food prep table, a bunch of different meats laying out and not in the freezer, the dishwasher wasn't sanitizing, there was mold everywhere, an employee was smoking in the food prep area, a bathroom in the kitchen had sewage all over the floor which made the whole place stink, and that's just 6 of the 110 violations. When they asked the restaurant owner a few questions, this is what he had to say.
No cameras.
No cameras what? First of all, don't touch. First of all, don't touch the camera.
Don't touch the camera. Talk to my attorney. Don't touch my camera. Don't touch my camera.
He built a secret home in the corner of the mall and lived there for 4 years before being discovered. While Providence Place Mall was under construction, Michael Townsend, who's an American artist, was running around the site when he noticed a section that made no sense. It was an opening between 2 walls that led to a space too small to be a store and too angular to be part of the parking lot. But he continued on his run. 4 years later, him and his friends were forced to leave the place that they were living because it was going to be destroyed and replaced with a parking lot. Because of this, he got an idea and remembered the space that he had seen years ago. That's when him and his friends got to work and cleaned up the space. They decorated it and took electricity from the mall for a TV and video games. The only thing they didn't have is a bathroom, but they were caught 4 years later, and they all went to trial for trespassing and many other charges, but the judge made the decision to let them go on probation. Prisoners who escaped prison and were never found. Clarence Anglin, John Anglin, and Frank Morris are the only 3 prisoners who managed to escape Alcatraz prison in 1962. Because the prison is on an island, they probably died in the icy waters of San Francisco, but their bodies were never found. Sharon Kin murdered 3 people and was sentenced to life imprisonment in the 1960s. After 13 years in a Mexican prison, she managed to escape thanks to a blackout. To this day, her arrest warrant is one of the longest in US history. John Patrick Hannon and Gwyneth Thomas escaped from the Verne prison in England. They used several knotted sheets to climb over a wall, and within a few hours, Thomas was captured. But Hannon has been free for 66 years and is considered one of the most successful escapees. How KFC was made from a gas station recipe. When Harlan Sanders was 6 years old, his father passed away, so his mother had to work while he took care of his siblings. In 1930, he got offered a job at the Shell Oil Company to manage a gas station. He quickly got the idea to make more money by making food for drivers passing through the gas station. His food, especially his fried chicken, became very famous. He came up with a technique to reduce the cooking time of the chicken, and also experimented with different spices until he got the flavor that he wanted. He then called it the secret blend of 11 herbs and spices. In 1950, he had to sell his place because of the construction of a new highway which decreased his customers, which decreased his sales, leaving him in debt. After this, he got the great idea to create the franchise Kentucky Fried Chicken. He drove around the country selling his recipe and preparation technique to different companies in exchange for 4 cents per 1 chicken sold. By 1963, there were more than 600 franchises throughout United States and Canada. And finally, when he was 73 years old, he sold his franchise to an investment group for what would be over $14 million today. These customers bought out a donut store so the owner can take care of his sick wife. This is what the store looked like at 5 in the morning. The line was already going out the door. All of the customers are there to show their support by buying as many donuts as they can so the owner can leave early to take care of his wife who's recovering from a brain aneurysm.
I bought 3 dozen. Yeah, I came in the other day and bought 300.
When this lady named Jonah got there, all of the donuts were sold out and it was only 7 in the morning. But instead of being mad, she was really happy. Because growing up, she also had a family business. So she was happy that people were there to show support for a local business. People who survived the impossible. On April 5th, 2015, Victoria Sealiers went parachuting. She had gone many times before, so she had lots of experience. But her husband, Emil, sabotaged her parachute without her knowing. She fell 4,000 feet before hitting the ground going 60 miles per hour. In most cases, that would be fatal, but luckily, she hit a soft part of the field that had just been plowed. So she ended up surviving but was badly injured. The police later found out that her husband was seeing 2 other ladies, and he had promised one of them that he would leave his wife and take her life insurance money for the 2 of them after her death. They also found out that he had tried to murder her a week before they went parachuting as well. He opened a gas valve in the kitchen while she was sleeping, then went to his ex-wife's house to sleep. Luckily, she woke up and smelled the gas in time to prevent anything bad from happening. Her husband Emil was then sentenced to life in prison. Here's how they caught Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was an American serial killer. He used his ability to talk in a polite manner to pass off as a quiet guy. Although the police had witnesses saying they seen a man with his characteristics in the same places where a woman had gone missing, they didn't find a killer. But then a sketch of Ted Bundy was released, and after this, the police received tons of calls saying they identified the killer. And finally, in 1975, the police arrested Ted for a traffic violation. He raised the police's suspicion when he wanted to leave, but they stopped him, and when they checked his car, they found questionable objects like crowbars, ski masks with holes for the eyes, handcuffs, and a lot more. He was then arrested a year later for an attempted kidnapping and sentenced to 15 years in prison. And months later, he was charged with the murder of Karen Campbell. In prison, he wasn't tied up, so he jumped out of the window of a library and escaped. He was captured a week later, but within months, he escaped again. He committed more murders both times he escaped, including a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. In 1979, he went on trial for the murders he committed at a sorority house. He was convicted and sentenced to death in the electric chair. After a bunch of appeals, he was electrocuted in 1989 and pronounced dead. But before his execution, he confessed to a bunch of murders, and it's believed that he may have committed over 50. If you see a cookie under your doormat, call the police immediately. When a burglar finds a house to target, they start by watching the owner to find out information about the routine to figure out the best time to enter the house. One of the tactics they use to gather information is so simple you wouldn't think twice about it. But next time you hear a crunch under your shoe while entering your house, stop and check what it is, because if it's a cookie, you're in trouble. This is a tactic burglars use to see if you're gone on a trip or what time you come home every day. Since it's a cookie, people usually don't think too much about it and may even think it's a leaf or a bug. But if the burglar checks on the cookie and it hasn't been broken in a couple days, then they know you're gone on a trip and will break into your house.